And on today's show, Annuity Income Riders, part 4 of this week's series on annuity solutions with nationally recognized annuity expert Mike McLaughlin. Hi everyone, I'm Steve Savant, syndicated financial columnist and contributing author to Backroom Technician in Innsbruck. Let's get down to business. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Great to be back.
Hey, I love it. Day 4, we're doing annuity overload. And I love it because we're going to talk about annuity income riders. Now, some of them you have to pay for. Some of them seem to be embedded in the contract. Some of them seem to be priced on the phantom account. Some of them seem to be priced on the actual account. I think you need to really do some due diligence on this to find out what it is, because I've noticed some of the highest income riders on some of the annuities that I've seen in the marketplace are doing it on the phantom account, and it's over 100 basis points. I find that to be somewhat punitive and maybe not very good for consumers.
Yeah, I think that you really have to take a look at the costs and the benefits, and it's not unusual anymore to see that anywhere from 95 to 115 basis points be included into the benefit base as opposed to the asset base. So yeah, it is confusing because, especially when you're talking about different types of contracts, some of them use the contract charge against the asset base and then the income against the benefit. Client really needs to understand what they're paying for and what the benefit is. Now, having said that, there was just a recent study, I believe that Genworth did it, and 70% of the annuity buyers said that they completely understood the charges because of all the great disclosures that are taking place. But more importantly, something in the neighborhood of 85% said that they believe that the benefits that they're getting from their annuity outweigh the cost that is on the contract.
Well, it's interesting. It's a value proposition.
Absolutely.
What did I pay? What was the benefit I received? And that has a price tag to it. And I've noticed that when you're comparing it to other annuities, and we have so many different types of annuities, some annuities have high expense loads. There's M&E charges. There's all kinds of things going on, fund expense loads. What we're trying to do is try to bring our costs as low as we can. Some income riders, we have to spend money. We don't mind spending money. I think it's a good insurance policy because, again, I've said this before on other shows, I'm not sure I'm going to still use that income rider. I'll let you know when I turn 70, and if I'm going to then look at the SPIA market, the DIA, your 2 days later, 2 days earlier, your temporary life period certain market. There's a lot of things I want to look at before I turn that trigger on. But it's a nice insurance policy inside the contract just to make sure I'm getting whatever I'm getting. In my case, I have one of them, mine are at 6%, guaranteed. I'll take it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when we're looking at this, how important when we're looking, because we finally got over this. And when I came into the business, annuities, and they should have been, but annuities were storage facilities. Nobody was looking at this as income. Nobody's annuitizing this. And then all of a sudden, all this money's going to the next generation. And of course, the tax issues are just terrible. Now, all of a sudden, I finally figured out, oh yes, annuities are for income. But income riders, whether it's fixed, MIGA, whether you have income riders on indexing, I mean, all of these things now are on our table to look at. What do you see in the market from an income rider comparison, and what are you looking for, like in a chart like this?
Well, I think that there's a couple things. Just in general, I think that the industry obviously started in the VA industry, and then as carriers found out that they had so much risk with that variable sub-account, they started taking a look, how do we make sure that we price this appropriately? And one of the ways to do that is to make sure you know what the risk is. In a fixed indexed annuity, just because of the nature of the underlying accumulation account, you know exactly what that's going to be worst case scenario. Unlike a VA, that could be 40% down. So generally speaking, we have much more consistent pricing across the fixed indexed annuity, which I think it makes it much more client centric. The first thing that I'm thinking or looking for really is the payout structure. What are the payout percentages? And these can vary from company to company. We see them range anywhere from 4.5 to 5.5. But also you have to take a look at the other variable that's coming into play right now is what are deferral credits. We're starting to see a little bit of that on the VA side, but Allianz is a great example where if you had purchased this contract at age 65 and you had a 5.5% payout, if you defer that payout for 1 year, you get an extra 45 basis points onto your payout structure. If you defer it for 2 years, you get 90 basis points. So it increases 45 basis points each and every year. So the strategy is really dependent upon when that client really thinks that they're going to turn that income faucet on. Are they going to do it now, or are they really going to hold it out for 10 years?
Do they need to know now what they're going to do?
I don't think that they need to know. However, certainly if they come to us and say, we're going to be turning income on in a couple years, then we can reasonably expect, okay, here's where you're going to fall into from a distribution percentage. The other thing is...
And do they have to make that call then, or can I make it in 2 years?
You can make that in 2 years.
Okay, so let's say I'm thinking, hey, I'm fine, Mike. I'd like to go another year, and you say, hey, that might be another 40 basis points.
It's guaranteed by contract to be another 45 basis points. But the problem is if you get through to the 10 years, maybe another carrier's 10-year distribution would have been better. So again, we're looking for flexibility with the client. How much flexibility do we need? How much liquidity? How much growth? And how much inflation protection? Some of our carriers have the ability, such as Allianz has a great tool of taking last year's payment times this year's rate of return, and that is your new check, which is a great opportunity to offset the impact of inflation.
And do you see a lot of advisors looking at that now?
We see a lot of advisors looking at that because of longevity. It's a great way to keep a client in the game.
When we come back from the break, we're going to talk more about annuity income riders. I think this is a huge area of education, and it sounds like we have a potpourri of possibilities here.
Absolutely.
We'll be right back after the break. Back in the day, life insurance professionals were called field underwriters. Then, carriers trained their field force in the basics of life insurance underwriting. Today, the insurance industry doesn't educate the agent population as they once did. But now you can have the Informed Risk Guide at your fingertips so you can illustrate a reasonable rate class for your life insurance prospects. Just request your copy of the Informed Risk Guide at downtobusiness.ashbrokerage.com. It's free from Ash Brokerage, the practice enhancement company. Well, welcome back to the second segment. Of course, I'm with Mike McLaughlin. We're talking about income from annuity riders. I love that. And I'm looking at an expense load sheet. And I think this is where I'd like to address, the annuity haters out on Google. They're always talking about, well, we have all these expense loads, fee drag. And I'm thinking, before you even come and throw rocks at my product line, I think you need to look at what you guys do. And I'm looking at typical ideas of expense loads, charges, and some of these, and these are somewhat I would call comparable product lines. I'm looking at this, and most of these are over 100 basis points. Their cost day one, and we're looking at a lot of the ones we're looking at. We referred to, I think it was Genworth in the last segment. They're sitting at 80 basis points below. They're 20 points down from that. So to walk me through why this is so important, and believe me, I know it. I want to make sure our advisors really get the idea of what the cost is all about.
Sure. I think the big significant difference is what's that underlying account. And when you take a look at some sub-accounts that have risk in them, then that carrier has to charge more for that additional risk that they may be 40% down. In a fixed indexed annuity chassis, you know exactly where you're going to be, and so that cost becomes a little bit easier to determine from an insurance carrier standpoint. But more importantly, it comes to how they know exactly how long that money is going to last and how long you're going to have it, because you have a tighter range of returns in that sub-account. So it's a lot easier to price. It's much more client-centric, but the scary thing is in any contract, I don't care whether it's a fixed indexed or a variable annuity chassis, what you have to really understand is what's the maximum rider charge. They may be at a current charge, but if you take a look at any FIA disclosure or any type of prospectus, these charges may be able to go as high as 200 to 250 basis points. It's not unusual to see those numbers. Okay, so let's make sure we understand. We're saying we have a current company practice, current account charges for expense loads, but I may also have a contractual. That disparity could be a couple hundred basis points. Absolutely. Yeah, so, you could get double charge and create additional fee drag. In your experience, are most index products fixed, or they still have two rates as well? In terms of maximum charges? Yeah, they have gone to maximum charges as well. But the likelihood of that going up to that maximum is mitigated because the insurance carrier knows exactly what their risk is going to be. Now, they could do it, though. They could do it. Okay, well, let's just think about this. Just remember that most people that have, if you've been around at least as long as I have in 30 years, how many carriers have ever went from their current company practice to their actual maximums? Now, it's very few. And keep in mind that that's no indication that that'll be a way in the future. They may get stuck and have to do it. But
I'm trying to look at, this is why I like Mike's theory. You look at renewal rates, you look at renewal expense loads. I mean, you're looking at this, looking for the people who have the historicity, because if I'm going to have two sets of rates, I want to have somebody that's faithful to the client.
Yeah, you have to take a look really when you're digging into the carrier. What other lines of business are they in? Are they in some morbidity risks so that they have the tables? Or are they just in mortality risks? You know, there's a lot of different things that can come into play to a pricing of a rider.
Now, I noticed that you seem to be spending some time on this Barclay index lately. In regards to income, how does this work with this new index thinking, which I know you're selling a lot of it right now? Walk me through why it's popular and how does that work in income?
Well, when you think about where a lot of income riders are used with asset allocation, a lot of times you see a forced asset allocation, either conservative, moderate conservative, or somewhere in between there.
I thought those were the three worlds.
Yeah, exactly. Look at somebody and tell them which way that they fit. What that Barclays does, it is a blend of the S&P 500 and a bond index, and it is managed towards volatility, similar to a moderate asset allocation. Probably about a 60-40 split is the typical allocation. So Allianz allows you to go into that particular bond or to that Barclays allocation. It has a current pricing of just under 3% spread. So you're giving up the first 3%, but above that, you get unlimited upside potential. So it's a great way to, from a pure accumulation standpoint. In fact, we're seeing more sales in a fixed index annuity without an income rider with a Barclays versus one that has an income rider to it.
Now, of course, if that's true, then they're taking off the expense of the income rider day one. And then on top of that, you're saying, if I had now we've had a pretty good market for the last year. Have we been able to back test the Barclays on this? And how did that work? I paid you said almost 300 basis points up front. That's a spread, but I have 100% participation.
Absolutely.
Talk to me about, hey, well, how's it been going?
Performance has been really good. You can take a look at 10-year increments or 15-year increments. I believe that bond index has been around since about 1989. So we have a good history. And when you take a look at most fixed index annuities, you are going to run around somewhere in the 5.5% to 6% rate of return.
Now, is that net of our front-end fee?
That would be net of the fees.
Okay.
What's important there is that when you think about their income rider strategy of applying last year's check times this year's rate of return, and you have a couple really good years in the market and in the Barclays with just a minus 3% load, that can give you some significant increases in your check year over year to help offset the impact of inflation.
And you see this as a huge appeal. Advisors really like that idea.
Yep. No downside risk, similar returns to asset allocation, and you have an increasing check. It's a win-win-win.
Wow, and I love win-win, and I like it because I think it has a lot of consumer savvy to it that can really help us later on as we see our checks getting a little bit bigger, hopefully.
Yep.
Well, that's all the time we have for today's show. Remember, before moving forward with any of the ideas, always consult your tax advisor, legal counsel, or your broker-dealer compliance officer. Missed an episode? You can go out and view any of our past episodes at downtobusiness.ashbrokerage.com. And remember, you could be wiser as an Ash Brokerage advisor. I'm Steve Savant. We'll see you tomorrow.